I had really found a good niche in the church and really love my singleness. I still do. I'm very happy to get married, but I have hardcore grieved the loss of my singleness. I don't know exactly what that means all the way, but I know that I've grieved that somewhere in my spirit. But it was interesting that it dropped kind of that conversation about loving singleness and do we want to be married and what's the better option? Can we hear? Because I was pretty convinced for like a couple of weeks that, yeah, I can hear that singleness is better. And so why am I getting married?
Hello and welcome to The Naked Gospel, where we re-envision what it looks like to follow Jesus, to follow him with our bodies, with our affections, with our relationships, and particularly with our sexuality. I am your host, Shane O'Neill. So a lot of these conversations revolve around talks I wish I could have had 10 years ago. And when it comes to relationships, we've all seen kind of couples do those kinds of conversations on YouTube or podcasts where they look back and they say, this is how we would have done it differently. As most of you probably know, I'm looking to get married in just a few weeks. And so I wanted to bring Kaylee on to have a conversation and basically air out our laundry and just process with you guys what it looks like to be honest, to be real, and to do relationship in public to some measure. Because Kaylee and I don't want to do this, after we get married as though we're looking back. We are in the midst of this. This is our present life. And what is, what is kind of the question of what is it like to know that you're about to make covenant and to make vows, but you haven't yet. And that's a big part of our current journey. And so we just wanted to process with you guys. To that end, we have our friend, Cale Baker, on. He is going to be hosting us today. So thank you for joining us. It's a unique conversation. We've never done this before, but I hope to have Kaylee on more in the future. So here's to the first of many. Thank you for joining us. And as always, if you guys enjoyed this conversation, please share it with somebody you think would benefit from it. But that's enough of that. Cale, the reins are yours, my friend.
Hello. I am your host, Cale Baker. I've always wanted to say that. I'm a good friend of Shane and Kaylee. Shane walked with me through singleness, through dating, through engagement, and through marriage. And I've gotten to do that with him and with Kaylee. And I'm excited to be here today to, like he said, process in the present moment how their relationship's been and how they're looking forward and how they're looking back. And we're going to do a little bit of that today. So let's start off with the classic question. How did you guys meet? What's your story? How long have you been together? I feel like every aunt at Thanksgiving asking this question. But yeah, how did you guys meet?
Boom. Well, we started dating January, March 1.
Yeah,
is that our official?
Like COVID. Think COVID. That's when we started dating, yeah.
Yeah. So March 1, I think we went on a few dates before then, though. I think probably as early as January 2020. But we have a long and complicated sort of history. Do you want to try and share that?
Yeah, sure. So how do we actually meet? So we met for the first time. It's kind of a fun story to be like, yeah, we met in Miami. Not anything weird. But, his parents hold a conference semi-annually, well, I guess every other year, and I ended up being at that conference, and that's where I met him for the first time. And then we had a brief conversation, I think, at that conference, and then he ended up moving to Lynchburg a year later or something like that, or 9 months later.
Yeah.
And then I think he reached out and was like, hey, new to the area, need some friends. You're friends of a lot of my friends, people I love, so maybe we should be friends. And I was like, yeah, sure.
And fall in love.
But yeah, I actually, the whole love at first sight, that's stupid, but that's kind of what I did. Yeah. I actually, the first time I ever met him, I heard his story from stage, and there was just something about him. I don't know. It wasn't, you didn't have the tattoos at the time. It wasn't the tattoos. So I'm not sure what it was, but it kind of ended up being a love at first sight thing for me. So anyways, you moved to Lynchburg. We started climbing together, rock climbing.
Well, I started going to church.
Oh, that's true. You showed up at church.
I think church, even before we had that conversation about, hey, you want to be friends.
Yeah.
We ended up going to the same church.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the reason that I ended up at Good Shepherd is because I actually met the pastor of Good Shepherd at this conference and started like hanging out. We just had like a conversation about some of the things we talked about at the conference. And so Church of the Good Shepherd was new to me, that church was. And so I had just recently started going there. So I was like, well, this is perfect.
Yeah.
Did you know she was new to the church at the time, or did you just assume she was a regular?
I didn't actually know. She's close with a mutual friend of ours, and I didn't know any of that backstory necessarily. And I also didn't know that she fell in love with me at first sight.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until,
idea.
I mean, we were hanging out pretty regularly, but I really did just see her as a friend. And so when she actually broke the news to me, when she actually told me, it really did devastate our friendship, and we stopped being friends for a number of years.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until January of last year where we started to spend time together again and actually intentionally go on a few dates.
Yeah. It's actually really unfortunate. Like, you were a good big brother. Well, I guess you are older than me. You were a good brother to me. Like, you definitely checked in, I think, annually or like every so often and just like, hey, how's our friendship? Are we doing okay? And I think you even asked something in the direction of like, are you falling for me? You know? And I was like, no, that's stupid. I would never do that. But like, here I am, like definitely still in love with him, you know?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have used that language at the time, but I think looking back at it, I was. And then it kind of just came to a point where he was starting to be interested in other girls, and it was breaking my heart, and he had no idea. And I like felt bad because I didn't have the integrity in our friendship that he did, where it was like, he knew he was checking in with me. He was loving me well as a brother, as a friend. And then I have all these feelings in my heart, and I'm not being honest with him. Like, I'm not having integrity in the same way that he is. And so it just kind of came to a breaking point where I was like, I need to tell him this. And then, you know, he had a few follow-up questions that were really hard for me. And then we went into a season of, I think, a year, maybe over a year, where we just couldn't be friends. Like, I couldn't do it, you know?
Good on you for telling him. You mentioned integrity, but also that's just tough to go through. So transitioning from that period of your relationship together, January of last year, Kaylee is still in a place where she's created distance for the sake of her own emotional well-being, but something inside of you, Shane, shifts, and you start thinking about it. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was two things. So we have a mutual friend. Her name's Cassie. Cassie and I had a conversation. And Cassie said, Shane, you are a good friend to me. You've been a safe friend for me. And I know that you care about me, but when Kaylee comes into a room, you light up in a way that you don't light up when me or any other woman comes into the room. And that was helpful for me because, I mean, there's this kind of hubris, this kind of pride that like I am the best surveyor of myself. And a lot of us live in isolation, and individualism is such a virtue and value of our culture. And I think it was just helpful for me. It was also kind of foreign too, but to hear someone else's evaluation and to go off of their observation and assuming that they might see something that I can't see. And to actually give them the benefit of the doubt, give them authority, give their observation authority over my observation. So there was that. And then meeting with our pastor, I was hanging out with him one night. His name's Mike. And we were I was processing with him Kaylee stuff. And Mike said that, he asked me, what are your feelings for Kaylee? And I said that I respect her. And then he said, tell me about that. And I was like, well, at the end of the day, she's the friend in my life that I respect most. I don't have another friend, another peer that I respect most. And then I went on to say, but there isn't that like overt sexual attraction. There isn't that like really strong chemistry and all these things. It's easy to be around her for sure. But like no sexual magnetism. And then he said that when he also really respected his wife while they were dating, they got married. And he said, over time in marriage, other things start to fall away. There's morning breath, and there's, like there's odors, and there's, you guys fight and argue, and like the sexual attraction, like the sexual chemistry that you bank everything on, ends up losing a lot of its heat. Yeah. But the thing that's never gone away in his relationship with his wife was his respect for her. And that was very significant. I was like, interesting to use respect as kind of a basis for who I should pursue as opposed to other things. And I tried to figure that out, like what is a basis for pursuing somebody and taking a relationship seriously. And I'd never actually considered respect, which sounds so weird saying it now, but that's just true. No one ever taught me that. So that was really helpful. And it was those two things that really recalibrated, might be too strong a language, but at least pointed me in a specific direction and gave me imagination to pursue it, gave me a willingness to pursue it. And yeah.
From there.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Yes.
I dig it. We will get into the meat of last January to now, but first, I keep saying, but first.
Several firsts.
You did a great job.
Yeah. Shane, you talk about respect for Kaylee. Kaylee, I'll direct a similar question to you that also transitions. How do you feel about this work that Shane gets to do? That's what we're here for now. I assume that you respect it. That's why I use that as a transition. But yeah, I mean, Shane talks about a lot of vulnerable things here. He often will bring you guys' relationship into the podcast in just little small ways. So yeah, how does that make you feel? What do you think about it as he continues doing these interviews?
A lot of it is, it's nice. It's a nice platform. Well, I'm kind of known generally in my own friend group, to back up a little bit. In my own friend group, I'm kind of known as the person who's willing to talk about anything. Like, even before, like, I've had friends tell me, like, I've been the first person that they've told about an issue that they have with masturbation or something, because they know I'm willing to talk about it. Like, I'm willing to say the word. I'd help one of my friends say the word masturbation for the first time. Like, she couldn't get it out. She was so ashamed. And so I love to talk about sex. Like, I think it is really beautiful. I think it's a huge mystery. It's ridiculous, crazy, and, those kinds of things. So for him to have that kind of work, it was an easy platform where, like, this is already something that I like to talk about and like to dig into. And then he already has this platform, and he actually has perspectives and is well read in the area. And even for him to have, as a part of my own story, pornography touching a little bit of my own story, it was helpful that his walk with that was already out in the light. It wasn't something that I had to try and figure out how to gently say, like, hey, is this a part of your story? Like, how do I walk into that very kindly and gently, but also pretty firm? Like, hey, you can't run rampant with pornography and be married to me, be dating me. That's not okay. And so I love it. I love hearing about the work that he's doing. I love hearing his thoughts. A lot of times I'm the first person that he bounces things off of, and I really love that. So fun. I love to explore with him. I read a few passages from the books. I've even read a couple, like one or two of the books that he's read, going through, just picked up a few pages of another one that he's read. And so I don't actually, I like it. It's only been helpful. It hasn't been something that's been like a hindrance, or I feel like I need to hide or awkward or anything like that. It's been only helpful and encouraging and enjoyable, I think.
That's awesome. It's really awesome. Yeah. I like how you want to add something, Shane?
Yeah. I was just going to say it's worth saying that Kaylee's been an awesome partner in this way, because she and I will read a book and then I'll interview the person, which is really cool, because then we get to process questions together. We get to process their work together. And I usually end up writing on it as well. And so as far as like having a partner who's an actual sounding board, and like it's like literally learning together, and being discipled by Jesus together, with similar content. It's it's unspeakably meaningful to me. That's all.
Yeah, so in some ways, what you're saying, it sounds like, is the podcast and the work itself has been a means by which you guys can grow together in the way that it fosters relationship, in the way that it creates partnership, in the way that you guys read things together. Can I get an example of maybe a book that you guys have read together? And yeah, just like play that out for me real time, a book, and how that then fed into the relationship in a fruitful way.
We were with you until that last part.
Yeah. Fruitful doesn't have to be fun or easy, but
this is true. This is true.
Do you want to start or?
Well, let's see. So Lori Craig's book, An Impossible Marriage, is one of the things we read when we got engaged, which was a great decision. Her book is amazing. I never thought I'd learn so much from a homosexual woman, about marriage.
Yeah.
But she is in, a heterosexual marriage, and to hear, because they had to dig so deep to figure out, okay, what does it look like for us to actually be one? Because I'm not sexually attracted to you, but I don't believe that me pursuing same-sex attracted marriage is orthodox, is biblical, what Jesus has for me and the good life he has for me. I believe that you, Matt, her husband's name is Matt, is what Jesus has for me. And so for them trying to figure out, kind of like what I was saying earlier, like what's like a basis for a relationship, and then them is like, what's a basis for oneness, like what makes us one. And the journey they had to go through is one of the hardest journeys I've ever read. And so Kaylee and I read through that, and it was so helpful,
Yeah, it was helpful for me in a lot of ways. Lori had a lot of the same, I don't struggle with homosexuality, same-sex attraction.
Yeah.
But she had a lot of good language. I do have, like, something that was uncovered in our premarital counseling was that I maybe do have a bit of general hate for men in general. A lot of it having to do with, like, some only partially true storylines about pornography, maybe. Still trying to uncover that and give language to it. But she had a lot of really helpful language for some of the things that I was feeling towards him. And some of the the things that I was feeling inside of myself that weren't even necessarily towards him, but that were towards marriage even, like this lifelong commitment thing. And it's not always nice. And what if he wants sex all the time? Like all these things. And, so that book was like incredibly helpful for me in that way. But also it really took like a toll on our relationship, because the middle of that book is just gnarly. Like it's just chapter after chapter. You're like opening the next chapter ready for some sort of relief or some sort of good news. And it's not there. It's just deeper crap. And so and I was resonating a lot of the words that she was using and a lot of the storylines she had. I was resonating with that. And I was like, I have an out. Like, I don't have to get married, actually. And we ended up arguing quite a bit as I was reading that book, and just because of the things that I was feeling inside of me, and she was giving actual words for it. And so somehow it became more real. So yeah, we argued a lot in that time, and he just I think almost every argument that we ended, he was like, hey Kaylee, I know you're really busy with like wedding and house stuff, but maybe could you take like 30 minutes tomorrow and just keep reading the next chapter? And he'd be like, okay, what chapter are you on? Because he knew it was coming. He had already read the book. And so that book was extremely helpful for me, but also really took a toll on our relationship.
Yeah.
But I think it was good. I mean, you could talk about, I guess, the challenging part of our relationship. There were several things, I think, but that was a big part of it.
Well, I think what it probably drew out the most was, and it did it for both of us. I was able to see what she was going through because I went through it. But the book, I mean, because Lori really is like, why not singleness, you know? And we're still at that part where we we haven't made covenants, to one another. We haven't made irrevocable promises. And so I think it helped us in a lot of ways. see the value of the singleness that Jesus has given us for the last several decades.
Yeah, for sure.
And to lament and grieve it properly. So much of the Christian narrative and the Western narrative of marriage is, well, of being human is, you do all these things and the real coming of age is getting married. Like marriage is the point to being human. It's the point, like we even use that language of your other half or whatever. And it's just unfair language because singleness is really remarkable. Like you are able to do things and to serve people and to develop relationships in ways. I mean, Paul says it's the better option. Jesus even says like singleness is better for the one who's able to hear that, you know? And a lot of us just, for whatever reason, just move right past those statements. Probably because of how sexualized our culture is. We are emphasizing how horny and lonely we are. So it was good to like take a step back, and Lori helped us do that, helped us take a step back and seriously doubt whether or not we wanted to get married. But it was important. It was important. And to treasure our singleness and to actually give us praise and to know that delight with Jesus.
There was a kind of a cool thing that dropped out of that singleness conversation where I knew that I did love my singleness. Like I very much knew that. I found in the past probably 3 to 5 years, I had really found a good niche in the church and really love my singleness. I still do. You know, I'm very happy to get married, but I have hardcore grieved the loss of my singleness. I don't know exactly what that means all the way, but I know that I've grieved that somewhere in my spirit. But it was interesting that it dropped kind of that conversation about loving singleness and do we want to be married and what's the better option? Can we hear? Because I was pretty convinced for like a couple of weeks that, yeah, I can hear that singleness is better. And so why am I getting married? Like if that is a better thing, I'm a one. Like what's the better thing? Let me do that, you know? So that was the better thing. I had really been convinced of that. But then it was interesting. Shane kind of like parsed out the fact that I wanted to get married because I loved Shane and I wanted to marry Shane. And he wanted to get married because, well, he wanted to get married and he loved me. Or wait, what was it? Did I say that right?
Yeah.
So it was like we both were willing to give up singleness for different reasons. I was willing to give up my singleness even though I loved it because I wanted to know marriage and know oneness with Shane. He wanted to know marriage and wanted to know oneness and wanted to do that with me. And so then we found ourselves in this place and we were able to come to I think we should still get married, you know?
Cool. I'm glad you feel that way.
There's definitely a choice there.
That's a good question. Thanks for the question.
Yeah. My wife and I are reading through Narnia right now. It's a very different experience. It's not creating these tough conversations, but a good experience nonetheless.
Hello, Shane here. I wanted to take a moment and let you guys know about a new resource that we created for you. It's a kind of a sexual integrity assessment, and I really have found great benefit from it. I very much dislike the kinds of assessments that make you ask and answer 200 questions. It makes me doubt myself and I get all sorts of confused. And this assessment only has something like 20 questions versus the 200. It's entirely confidential, and the benefit to an assessment like this is that we can't fight a nameless, formless ghost, and it gives name and form to the unwanted sexual behavior in our life so that we can start to know healing and start to know real redemption in our lives. And of course, it doesn't just leave you there, it creates a load of options afterwards for you to move forward, to know how to continue on your path of healing. So we recommend it for those reasons. And of course, options are given afterwards for what it looks like to move forward and to continue to find healing and to know wholeness. So look for those. It's a huge resource, huge benefit. And the resource is two-pronged. If you're struggling, then this resource exists for you. And for those who have already gotten some ways down on the journey of healing, there's a way to actually give back and to be present to those who are struggling, to take the gift of redemption in your own life and start to give it to other people. The link will be down below. It will be right under the description. I'll make it the first link in the show notes. So do check that out, and let's go ahead and get back to the interview.
Kaylee, you mentioned grieving your singleness and letting go of that and moving forward into marriage from there. Shane, what does that process look like for you? Yeah, because both of you are getting married above what would be the quote unquote national average for someone getting married. So you've practiced singleness for a lot longer. So there's almost more to grieve. There's more to let go of because you've filled pieces of yourselves with other people. And now you're moving into a oneness where you have to learn to do that in a different way. You mentioned grieving. Shane, what does that process look like for you?
I don't have a very concise answer. I would say that it took a long time, but probably in my mid-20s, I started realizing that singleness is awesome. And that was helpful. I was really able to start living into relationships and spending time even with people who were married, who were craving relationship, but didn't necessarily know how to pursue it. There is, again, part of the cultural narrative is like you get married and then all of a sudden you just insulate. You don't really need anything else because they're your other half and it's you guys against the world, you know? And it's like, well, it's a load of crap. It's just not true. And so a lot of marriages are hurting and struggling because they don't know how to let people in. And so just maybe voluntarily letting yourself in. Those sorts of things, just pursuing honest relationship with people has been really cool. I've lived with, so there's a couple, they got married and they didn't want to know their marriage without community because they see that cultural script and they knew they'd live into it. Like we all just live into it. It's just natural, unfortunately. And so they invited me to live with them so that they would never know marriage without community. And I've lived with them for the last 4.5 years, you know, which is really incredible. So singleness has been very intentional, very precious to me. I think that's probably as engaging an answer as I can give. I think it is worth saying though that if you're doing singleness right, then you also maybe know what you want when you're going to get married. I think Kaylee and I have been able to have those conversations and she's able to even respect certain things where it's like Shane loves to do that and that's precious to him. Those friends are precious to him. And I'm able to do the same thing. It's like, I don't need to be your world, you know, like I can enjoy through you. I can enjoy through these things, your experience with me. And we come back and we story these things to one another, but we don't have to be like oneness doesn't mean tethered together and kind of inseparable in that way or forsaking all the things that we love because those things are a violation of some sort. So process, I mean, we're still in the mix of that. And that's a conversation for another time. But I think we've been able to at least begin those conversations. And that's been helpful. It doesn't seem like a lot of other couples know necessarily how to have those conversations.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I don't think because of what you're saying of the cultural narrative that says marriage is the climax of life. Of course, you're not grieving singleness. You're leaving something that's not, it's less than. And so there really hasn't been enough of a conversation around what it does look like to grieve something that you're losing, but also to let, like you said, you're not sacrificing huge pieces of yourself in all respects of the word. You are, new pieces of you are blossoming as well. So
Amen.
I like that a lot.
Thanks, Cal.
Transitioning to something different. Obviously on the podcast, we talk a lot, and by we, I mean Shane. Shane talks a lot with our guests about sexual practice and how to walk in sexual integrity with our bodies, with our minds, with our imaginations. But here's a real-time relationship where you guys are walking in dating and engagement, and you know that something sacred in sex is on the horizon. It's like 3.5 weeks away, sure. So what does it look like for you guys to practice boundaries to protect that up until this point? What does boundaries look like for you? Like, how have you guys messed up post messing up? Like, what did it look like reconciling after a mess up? Because I know those can just get even more messy. I'd love to hear you guys unpack some of that.
How should we start that? Let's see. We probably took like a few months before we were dating, but before we kissed, learning how to hold hands, learning what touch feels like, those sorts of things. I think we did a good job of giving those things space and their time. I think so. For instance, walking while holding hands takes a lot of dexterity. You know, it's like the cute thing to do in the movies. Like everyone does it, but it's like I don't like it so much. I don't like it so much. Yeah. So like figuring those things out. It's like, oh, we're all cutesy, but we're also off balance and off kilter and keep running into each other. So just those sorts of moments. And there's like, you know, permissions of, can I put my hand on her leg while I'm driving? Like those sorts of things that'll get your heart racing. And just trying to figure out what it looks like to be present to one another physically. You know, when somebody's mourning or upset, do I hug her? Does she want space? So there's a whole language there that it takes time to learn, and I think it's okay to take time to learn it. Let's see. Now, when we did kiss, it was over the summer, and that, like, I don't think, like, we didn't go beyond that, but we jumped into it too quickly. And we were in spaces where we weren't interruptible. I think you used that language.
We knew we probably wouldn't be interrupted.
Yeah, it was very unlikely. Yeah, and so I think that was just dumb. You know, just foolish. I would say that was something we had to figure out. There's also Kaylee, and she can jump in at this point, but Kaylee's a virgin. I'm not, and so there are certain emotional reactions that she's going to have that I don't have. Some of them because I've burned them out. I have the ideal in my head, and so I can say no to her, not because of a feeling, but actually because of a value or the principle. Whereas for her, trying to figure out how to navigate the emotions of it and the remorse and those sorts of things, it was very different, and I think we're actually still trying to figure out what it looks like to, as you say, I think it's a great word. What does it look like to reconcile? Because you're disconnected, and to just move past those moments, assuming that they don't impact the relationship, is also foolish.
Yeah. I think coming into like our physical relationship, I had only ever kissed one other guy, so he's only the second guy I've ever kissed, and so that was, I'm like, you know, of course there's this guy that I'm in love with from afar for years, and then here I am kissing him, like, you know, the fireworks and the emotion and the regret, and then are we starting this too early, all these things. But I had a friend get married, I guess May. We started dating in March, May of 2020. They're getting married, whole COVID wedding. Quite the experience, actually. But anyways, I remember her coming back from her honeymoon, and we're all like talking about, you know, what happened, how'd it go, you know, all these things. And, you know, one of the things that she said is like, it was such a different experience than I thought it would be. And she was so anxious about the situation. And then she came out of it actually saying, this like amazing spiritual thing happened, and I have no idea how to tell you, but like I can just cry happy tears and tell you what I can tell you. And so then I have this imagination for this beautiful thing, and I start to realize that, yeah, like I said earlier, I've been this girl who anybody can talk to me about sex, but then I realized actually, I mean, I always knew that I was like a sexual being. I didn't really have trouble. I knew I had sexual impulses. I knew that it wasn't like because I'm a virgin, it wasn't as though I had no idea what my sexuality was. Like I knew that I had a sexual part of me. But then I started to step into the realization, because we'd been dating for a couple of months, started to get at least semi-serious pretty quickly. Serious in like commitment, not physically. And so then I started to think, oh my gosh, like that's really vulnerable. And like, oh my gosh, it's me who's going to be having these intimate kinds of relationships, and what if we do get married, and what if we do have sex and when we're married, and it's just like these things start coloring my imagination. And then we'd had like a few times where especially I was coming up the next day after we had maybe pushed a boundary and feeling just a lot of remorse and just feeling gross, and then realizing, oh my gosh, like my friend had this beautiful picture of sexual intimacy, and every time I come out of any sort of intimacy, physical intimacy, I'm feeling guilty. And so then it was this, and I already had this pornography narrative where like sex is gross, all men want is sex, they don't actually care about me as a human being, they just want my body. I had that told to me growing up, all men want one thing from you. And that I had to unpack that. We actually unpacked that on a walk one day. It was really helpful for him to help me unpack that a little bit. But and so then here I am, like, Is sex going to be this beautiful thing? As me, as a person, am I going to be able to enjoy any sort of physical sexual intimacy? Even though I know generally for the population, for married couples, it can be intimate, it can be enjoyable. You can have this spiritual experience, and I think that it should be, it can be. And so then I just kept having this narrative of like, but it's not good for me. But it's not something I can enjoy. It's not. Yeah, I shouldn't enjoy it because here I am using it out of context. And so we had to have a conversation about that. And then I painted this picture of like, well, what if, like, why does everybody think that your wedding night has to be like intercourse? Like, why does it have to culminate in intercourse? Like, why can't your wedding night be the beginning, the initiation of gentle touch? Like, you don't have to be naked your wedding night. Like, what if you just like cuddle for the first, like, what if you spoon for the first time? You know, like, why does it this, we have to, the wedding night is the culmination, intercourse will happen. And so then I started to paint this beautiful picture of like, what if it's the beginning of any sort of sexual intimacy? And, you know, I think even now mourning the fact that like, that's not what it will be for us. Like, we haven't kept to that story, you know? But at the same time, being able to look back and now letting myself enjoy physical interaction with Shane, with you, it's been a double-edged sword because it's like, oh, I can enjoy this. But also at the same time, it's like, but not yet, you know, not yet all the way. Yeah. And so it's that not yet, but we are promised, but we're not, but we publicly promised, but we haven't publicly made vow. And it's all this messiness. But now I'm like really excited for the honeymoon. I never thought I'd be excited for the honeymoon. Like 90% of me most of the time is super excited for the honeymoon.
That's awesome.
You know, so that journey.
Me too.
Me too. Yeah. I like that you bring up the pressure of, at least, especially on the front end. It's a conversation again that doesn't happen enough. Of there is so much pressure on the wedding night. Yeah. Especially if you are within a relationship where you're saving that for that night. There's pressure, and it can be disappointing instead of a lovely experience if it doesn't culminate in what it's supposed to culminate in, quote unquote.
Supposed to.
And so I really like that you bring that up. That's awesome. It's something that I wish I had known walking into marriage. And yeah. And so, still discussing kind of your stories relationally within this, you mentioned shame and guilt and then processing through that together as you move through sexual experiences at this point. But like Shane said, you have saved yourself in terms of sex and you're a virgin, and Shane, you have a bit of a, let's call it a messier sexual history. So what is it like with that, processing through potential shame with that? Yeah, because that's tough. It's a sacred and sensitive topic, and there is a lot of shame wrapped into it. I talk to men all the time with so much shame. And so, what was it like processing through that for you?
I want to point out, even now, as you use the word virgin, it sounds like a pejorative word. It sounds like a negative word.
I feel that when I say it out loud. I don't know what else to say though.
It's wild. I was reading this book, and it was talking about how the 40-year-old virgin is a title that we would read today, and we understand it's a comedy. If that title was of a play, say 500 years ago, it would be of a very virtuous person. You know? I was like,
the narrative has shifted.
Totally. Okay, so shame. Yeah, shame is there for sure. Shame is, I mean, it's a present emotion in my internal world on a regular, like a daily basis. I don't know the nuances of this. Let's see. So Kaylee is a gift. And it really, I mean, like, I think there's kind of just this baseline of I need forgiveness on all the things. I was a drug addict, you know. I'd burned my relationship with my family. I had to rebuild friendship. I had failed out of college. You know, like I met Jesus when I was 19, and everything's changed since then, but it's rebuilding. So I think Kaylee, just like all the other beautiful things in my life, are gifts. And so I like, like shame is there, but it's not louder than the value of the gift. Like, because that can happen where shame ends up becoming more than the fact that you're still married, you know, or like you have children, or someone actually likes you.
So true.
Like there's these gifts, and it's like, well, shame. It's like, yeah, okay, like I process it. Like it's real. Don't ignore it. Don't repress it. But it just can't own you. It'll own you. It'll possess your soul. And it's threatened to do that in our relationship at different points, but just keep coming back to, I mean, Kaylee gets to be the gospel to me. And she can speak into that if she wants to, but Jesus was pure. He was God, and he decides to put on my shame and then bear himself naked in front of all the world. Amen. And then die. So it's really like, I mean, Kaylee is the gospel to me, just like so many other things. And so I like, my responsibility really is just to receive it as the gift that it is. Fair?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I think do you want my perspective?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so
for sure.
I can imagine Kale saying no.
No, thank you.
We'll move on. All done with that. From my perspective, I realized it's maybe a month ago now that I had some anger kind of boiling up inside of me that, like, well, I'm a virgin and you're not. Like, how dare you? You know? And also some of these, like, well, I don't want to give you my virginity because what are you giving me? And it was a lot of, like, aiming at him and judging him and being frustrated and not being able to see the grace. So I just got lunch with one of my friends, and it was, in her marriage, it was the opposite. She wasn't a virgin, had actually been married before and had a pretty serious sexual history even before she had been married, and he was a virgin coming in. And so I asked her from a female perspective, and maybe even from her husband's perspective, that they had ever even talked about that. And I was just able to air out a lot of my judgments and my anger with her, and then have her help me form them into questions. Like, so one of the questions that came out of that conversation is, Shane, what do you think that you're giving me on our wedding night, and what do you think that I'm giving you? And I don't know what about it, but there was something that was really important for me to hear what he thinks I'm giving him. It was really necessary for me to ask that question. And since we had that conversation, I'm like, all right, we're good. This is great. I have there's no residual anger, no resentment, no frustration. And I think that the space, like, it's been a long while since you've had any sort of sexual interaction with anybody besides me. So that also has been a big, a huge factor in that emotionally for me. And we've also had lots of conversations about, like, are you comparing me? Are you, like, and I have all these weird questions that are even outside of him and outside of his relationship with pornography, that I had to ask him about pornography because it was my like, imagination running wild, a storyline running wild.
I think the important thing is that we had those conversations.
Yeah.
I like, either people will judge them as ridiculous questions, don't air them out, or like, I don't know how he'll react, or like when someone has the vulnerability to ask these really, you know, even like how you couch it, you can phrase it accusationally or as a vulnerability, the vulnerability that it is, and let the person respond. There's a lot that has to go pretty well for it to go well entirely.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I think just practicing that together is really good, because Kaylee, when she said, like, what do you think you're giving me, and what do you think I'm giving you, she had initially couched that as like, hey, I want you to take some time and like really process this and get back to me. And I was like, Kaylee, I've thought about that for months. Like, I know the answer to that question. She's like, you do? I was like, yeah, like, we can talk about that whenever you want. Like, I have those answers.
Yeah, it was a casual conversation by the asparagus in Kroger or something like
that.
Like, we were just, I don't know why we got there, but anyways.
Yeah. We do most of our heavy talking in produce. Yeah.
Cool. I like hearing, it seems like through both of your processings, through shame, through what could potentially be resentment, God has brought you both to a place of realizing that you both have gifts to give to each other, and you both are gifts to each other. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And with that kind of brings us to our last question. Through the season, especially through dating and through engagement, and as you look forward 3.5 weeks to marriage, how has Jesus been intentionally discipling you as you guys move forward in that, as you learn how to honor each other both physically but also emotionally and spiritually, holistically? Yeah.
I do want to say real quick, because this is retroactive, but we absolutely have made mistakes physically. I had said earlier something about like kissing and it not going beyond that. I meant it within those contexts. Like over that summer we were good, but like we have been handsy in ways we ought not, you know. Like we've definitely violated boundaries, and not just like boundaries you established where it's like afterwards it's like, yeah, we sinned, you know, like that was wrong. And so those are real. Those have been real moments in our journey. I don't want to at all make it sound like we've done things perfectly, because we have argued a lot. You know, we've messed up a lot, and we've doubted being together. You know, those sorts of things, and choosing. Like love is a choice. That choosing to be together has been a really long journey, and with multiple seasons, you know, like it's not just an episode of the story. It's a narrative arc for multiple seasons that we've gone through together. So I just wanted to air that out.
I think most of our story with physicality is descriptive rather than prescriptive. I think there are lots of parts of our relationship that could be prescriptive.
For sure.
And as we disciple people in marriages, as we get married and walk that out for the rest of our marriage, like I think our story in a lot of ways it's both descriptive and prescriptive, and being honest about that.
You're so smart. So one of the things, to go back to your actual question, Jesus discipled us. So one of the things I liked that we've done is we've picked like couples, because a lot of people will date in isolation. We'll date in isolation. So there are couples that we really love and value and look up to. We look up to their relationships, their big brothers and big sisters, to us and our community. They love Jesus. We love their relationship with Jesus. We love their relationship with each other. We love how they parent, whatever it might be. And we just picked a couple of those, and then we meet with them. I mean, we strive for a monthly, but it ends up being bi-monthly. And that's been as important as anything else we've done. Dating in community. And so, because a lot of people react, it's like dating, which means isolation, or courting, which is something you only do in public. It's like, I think it makes sense, and it's intuitive. Like, do a blend of both, you know? Like, it's not either or. Be creative and be responsible, and date in the light. I think that's okay. I enjoy seeing how she laughs on game night with other people. You know, I enjoy learning who she is in front of other people, because I get to see sides of Kaylee that I don't see elsewhere, and that's important. The only other answer I have to that question, Jesus has been really cool into this. I've loved this. Realizing, I think I would have said this before, but it feels different when I'm saying it now, realizing that the gospel is union. There's this guy named Joshua Ryan Butler. He came on the podcast maybe a month or two ago, and we talked about that, sex as salvation. And so that language in Scripture of us in Christ and Christ in us and the Father in Christ, just really, and it's all throughout the New Testament. It's and it's intentionally sexualized language to communicate what the gospel is. Being inside someone is penetrating them. That's erotic language. It's sex language. And so the gospel, because it's become a little bit more cliche in a way to say the gospel is relationship. It's like, yeah, that's true, but what kind and what does that mean? It's like, well, no, it means union. It means him being inside of you, you know? And so I'm going to be waking up to Kaylee, and that's going to set the tone for the day, the relational tone for the day. So now understand that I'm waking up with Jesus, you know, and understanding that in a different way. Because a lot of times it's like, wake up, like, is he pissed at me? You know, is he angry at me? Like, should I just avoid him all day? What do I do? And just waking up and knowing his delight. You know, so even the way you wake up and turn over in bed and who you see first, right? Like the gospel's wrapped up in that. Kaylee and I have not slept together. I haven't had that experience with her. Full disclaimer.
Minus 3 weeks.
Right. I like that she's excited about that. So union, I think the gospel as union, as marriage. So whether you're single or you're married, you have union with Jesus and you're practicing union. That is discipleship. That is following in the Jesus way. That's been blowing my world apart.
I think the thing that stands out to me most is, again, the community aspect of it. I would say more family. So Jesus has been so faithful to give me family. I graduated from high school. He gave me a family in Ohio. I come here. He gave me a family in Cassie's family. And then I go to nursing school randomly in Charlottesville, and he gives me family there. And then while I come to Good Shepherd, he gives me a really close family there, literal family units. And then they just invite me in, and it's just, I walk into the door, and it's my home, and it's their home, and we're family. And I mean, that's the unit of society, right, is family units. And how are those created? By sex, you know, family, I understand through my singleness a lot of nuances of family and how to make family and become a family with non-blood people. Jesus blood, not human blood. And so I'm really excited to continue learning what that means in my own literal family. And it will be our own blood, human blood, Jesus blood. Lord willing, if we were to have kids. And so I see Jesus again discipling in a story of family. And you see that through the gospel. And so being able to live into that in a whole new aspect, which is like, okay, yeah, I can leave behind like my singleness family idea, and I can enter into a marriage family idea. I think that's been a really important and a really cool thing I've seen Jesus do. And even knowing the families that I knew in my singleness, knowing them in my dating relationship, and those families, a lot of the families we've been talking about are the families that we've been getting together with that I knew from my singleness. And so them even becoming my family in my marriage, in my dating life. So faithfulness.
My family loves the heck out of you.
Yeah.
So it's been cool to see that relationship become real.
Yeah. I mean, and goodness, that I would be amiss to not say the faithfulness of Jesus. I mean, I like I said, met him for the first time, probably fell in love with him at first sight kind of thing.
In Miami.
Because that sounds so much more erotic, and we got to sexualize everything, you know? And that's Miami sexualized. And so, yeah, just the faithfulness of Jesus, the many tears, the many fights that I had with Jesus, the how dare you, why did you give me this feeling, and talking with people and letting it go, and then him asking me to open up my heart again to Shane when I had already been so raw, and there was so many parts of it, and it was still, you know. And so just the faithfulness of Jesus, my goodness, like I think I've had tears well up in my eyes as I'm like starting an IV at work, because oh my goodness, like the man that I love, I'm about to marry, and Jesus has given me him, you know, and I get to give myself to him. So, yeah.
Because Kaylee's a nurse.
I am a nurse.
Being the nurse thing.
I am a nurse, yes.
Yeah. Kaylee, you've been an awesome host.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Kale.
I am Kale Baker, and I am your host. Thanks. I've enjoyed it. Yeah, I've got nothing to add.
Yeah. Well, we did talk about how to close out the podcast, so I will go ahead and do this. Guys, thank you so much for joining with us. Thank you for stewarding Kaylee and I. I hope that this encourages you guys to just be more vulnerable in your own stories, to share them with one another. I was talking with Sheila Gregoire a few weeks ago, and it came up that, and this is strong language, but I think the strong language is okay, that sex talk might be the bastardized version of just honest communication during intimacy. When it comes to pornography, that kind of strong language of sex talk is so glorified, but what does it look like to just have a vulnerable conversation about preferences and likes and hurts and wounds? I'm convinced that that's where real relationship takes place. So thank you for listening to Kaylee and I try and do that in public. I hope that this has been helpful for you. If it has been, would you share it with somebody you think would benefit from it? Continue to track with us, and we will catch you all next time. Bye.